welcome back to my channel. It feels quite cold today. For the first time it actually feels quite wintry. I don't know if it's just me, I do feel the cold a bit. So I'm wearing my thick coat today. I'm not putting the heating on yet. I refuse to put the heating on until I really have to, because it's quite expensive. So usually I'll try and defer doing that until the end of November usually, so I feel it's a bit early yet, so I'm just wearing my thick coat as it does feel rather cold. It's funny, it didn't feel cold last night was quite mild, but it feels like the temperature has just fallen recently, but I don't know whether that's just me, and because I'm kind of stuck at home, I guess if I was moving around more maybe I wouldn't feel it so much, but it just feels like the temperature's dropped, so I've just put, that's why I'm wearing my thick coat. And I also like wearing this coat because it's feels like being wrapped in a blanket, because it's kind of fleece lined. And I just like being wrapped up with my hood up. I don't know, I just like it. So anyway, so yeah, that's, excuse the look. Looks like I'm wrapped in a bin bag, but I do like being wrapped up. Anyway, in today's video, I wanted to go through a Panorama documentary which I've just seen on BBC iPlayer. So for those of you who have access to the licence fee and who pay the licence fee and have access to BBC, it's available to watch on BBC iPlayer, and it will be up there for another year, I think, or 11 months to be precise. But it's a Panorama, and it's entitled Kelly Bright, Autism, School and Families on the Edge. And this Panorama documentary, I think it was released earlier this month. And Kelly Bright is an actress in EastEnders. I don't watch EastEnders, by the way. I used to when I was younger. I actually used to watch EastEnders. I really used to like EastEnders actually, but then we stopped watching it around the time that McCutcheon, when was it? Martine McCutcheon left. I can't remember when it was now, but anyway, that's a different thing. I used to actually like watching EastEnders, but I don't watch it anymore, so I don't really know. But anyway, Kelly Bright is an actress in EastEnders anyway, and she's got an autistic son. She has an autistic son who's autistic and has ADHD and is dyslexic, and and she's spent a lot of time trying to get him an EHCP plan. An EHCP plan, for those who don't know, it's Education, Health and Care Plan, which is a legally binding document that's given to a subset of children with so-called special educational needs, disabilities, SEN. It's given to a subset of those children who have the highest needs, but basically it's a legally binding document, which means that the school has to provide the support that's outlined in the document. It's legally binding, and it means they get extra funding along with this document, but it's quite hard to get. And that's what this programme was looking at, was like the struggle to get this document really, and the struggles that these families are experiencing in the meantime, managing their children's needs. The EHCP plan replaced what used to be a statement of special educational needs. So back in my day when I was at school, EHCP didn't exist, there was a statement. So EHCP replaced the statement. I can't actually remember when EHCPs came in. I wasn't at school when they came in, so yeah. But anyway, so that's what this programme was really exploring, and Kelly Bright went and met a few different people. They all autistic, all parents with autistic children. So I'm just going to go through really. I took lots of notes, just sort of one down of the programme. So the first one she met was a mother called Tunde, and her son Buddy, and they live in London. Buddy is 15 years old, and he's not been able to go to school since October last year. He's autistic. And yeah, so he hasn't been in school for a long time. But they used to live in Scotland, where he was in mainstream education, but he was bullied. And then last October they moved to London to be closer to family. But Buddy hasn't been in school since then. And the mother wants him to go to a school that offers extra help to children who can't cope in mainstream education, but no school has been available since then. And a council has arranged lessons for him in a library for 19 hours a week, so he gets one-to-one tuition in a library because he hasn't been in school since they moved to London. And then, so that was the first one, and then she went to Dorset to visit 6-year-old Etta, who's also autistic, but 6-year-old Etta has a demand avoidant type profile. That's to say, pathological demand avoidance profile, PDA, alongside her autism, which is a very specific profile where a person resists all demands of everyday life. Like, these can be simple demands such as getting dressed, doing your teeth, going to school, basically any demand, and it causes extreme anxiety. So it's like this extreme anxiety response to demands. Not all autistic people have this profile, although some demand avoidance is pretty common in autism of some degree, but this is a very extreme profile that can, in some cases, go along with autism. There's a bit of a debate as to what extent could this be a particular subtype of autism, or is it more a kind of coexisting anxiety disorder, specifically around demands that some autistic people face because of the way their autism affects them. But it all comes down really to a need to be in control. And I mean, a need to be in control and kind of rigidity is basically part of the autism criteria anyway, but obviously that can express itself in different ways, and then goes with demand avoidance. It's very, very focused around not being able to follow other people's demands. That's how this need for control and rigidity kind of expresses itself. I'll have to do more research to find out why some autistics have this particular profile. It just shows, I guess, how autism is very, very varied and obviously affects people differently. The core features are the same, but how they express can be very, very different. And in this case, that need for control expresses itself in a refusal to follow everyday demands of life because of this extreme anxiety. It almost results in a kind of like a state of paralysis in the person, and like this kind of extreme sort of fight or flight response, which can result in meltdowns and shutdowns and all of that. So yes, most days that will start with 6-year-old Etta telling her mum that she's not going to school. She gets very anxious when she's told what to do, so she avoids demands at all costs. So she won't put her school uniform on. She also used to storm out of her house and avoid going to school, which could be quite dangerous because she would just run out of her house. She's also been diagnosed with ADHD as well, so she's very hyperactive. And she could be awake at 4 a.m. in the morning, for example. And last school year, Etta only made it in around 70% of the time. And it can take her up to 3 hours to get ready in the morning as well. She does get some special lessons about managing her autism and emotions. She does get some special lessons at school. But she's not made it in school for almost 6 months. That's a different person. Sorry, ignore that. No, we're talking about Etta at the moment. Etta does go to school. She does go to school, but it can take her a very long time. It can take her up to 3 hours to get her ready. Then the next person that Kelly meets is 12-year-old Caris, who lives in Yorkshire. It's Scarborough, I think she said. And she's not made it into school for almost 6 months. So she literally hasn't been in school for 6 months, and she's autistic, but she also struggles with a condition called selective mutism, which means that she can't speak, like she goes selectively mute in certain situations. It's called situational mutism because they can speak. It's not that they can't talk, it's just because of anxiety. I guess a bit like the demand avoidance profile, it's another way that anxiety can sometimes manifest in autistic people. And in some autistic people, the anxiety can manifest in not being able to talk in specific situations. So, for example, not being able to talk in school, but they might be able to talk with their family. So it's almost like so when they're with their family or with particular people, they could be very talkative, but then in certain select situations, like being at school, they'll just completely not be able to talk. That's why it's called selective mutism, because it's not like they're mute all the time, it's just in particular situations. And again, that's kind of like an anxiety disorder or an expression of anxiety in some autistic people. So that's what Caris has. So she struggled to speak in front of class. But when she started at her local comprehensive school last year, she hadn't been diagnosed with autism, but she was already getting some extra help before her diagnosis. But she seemed to be doing well, but then in December things fell apart. She was on the stairs inconsolable, and she was diagnosed autistic 3 months later when she fell apart. And her mother describes how she was doing autistic masking, so trying to fit in, but then she had an autistic burnout, as her mother said, because of the toll that the masking was taking on her, and the anxiety and everything. So her parents have been asking North Yorkshire Council for 3 years for extra help at school. But the issue, as Tim Nichols from the National Autistic Society, who was interviewed on the programme, says, the issue is that special educational needs is a broad term, so it's basically they're talking about a highly diverse bunch of kids in mainstream school, and the system is not geared for that at all, because the system is very, very rigid, so it's not really geared towards helping this very, very diverse group of children that cannot fit into that very rigid system. I mean, to be fair, the system doesn't really fit anyone, even those without so-called special educational needs. I don't actually like the term special educational needs, by the way, as I was labelled with it, and I hate that term, but anyway, that's the term I use. I don't like the word special needs, it sounds a bit icky, I don't like it. Personally, I prefer just saying disabled children, but anyway, that's the term I use, so we'll just go with it. But the system is, I don't think the system is actually geared for any child, really, in mainstream. It's very kind of one size fits all. I mean, maybe it meets the needs of some people, who knows, but particularly not for kids with disabilities. Now, schools already support children with special educational needs and disabilities. They already support children, but if parents think that the child needs more help, then they can make an application to the local authority for an education, health and care plan, which, as I've already said, has replaced statements. Can't remember when it was, but it replaced statements anyway. Now, the paperwork to fill out these EHCPs, the paperwork can take hours and hours, as Kelly, the presenter, was saying. It took her hours and hours to apply for her son's EHCP. It's a little bit like the benefit process, really, when you're applying for personal independence payment, PIP, which replaced disability living allowance, and other benefits. It's a similar sort of thing. The paperwork is absolutely bloody horrendous. It can actually end up literally killing people. I mean, seriously, this is absolutely draining. So, it could take people a really, really, really long time. But it's a very important document because it states the school that the child is meant to go to, and it says what extra support they should receive. So although schools should be providing support to all children with so-called special educational needs, not all children will get an EHCP. The EHCP is different because it's legally binding, and it means the child has to receive a certain amount of support as is specified in this document. So Tunde and Buddy are applying for an EHCP. Again, it talks about how he had an assessment for it, and it's his second assessment in 5 days. It's the second time they've tried to get an EHCP since they moved to London. The first time round, Suffolk Council rejected them. Without assessing Buddy, they just rejected him. Around a quarter of applications are turned down before the assessment stage. But in Scotland, he didn't have to apply for the equivalent of an EHCP because the comprehensive school there organised some support that was focused on his learning. But now they've moved, they've had to go through this process of trying to get support for him. And Tunde has had to give up her job as applying has taken up so much of her time, and that's very common as well. So again, it goes back to Etta's family, who are a bit further along the EHCP process, and she's already been assessed, but the paperwork took ages for her mother, and her mother has also given up her job as a teacher. She had to give up her job to do this. But having an EHCP might mean that the mother can go back to work. And Carris's family, meanwhile, in Yorkshire, have been trying to get an EHCP for 3 years. Their first application was turned down after Carris was assessed. The second application has taken almost 2 years, but it's now been accepted by the council. And today, an NSS Helga local authority will now name a school for Carris, but they've named the school she can't attend, mainstream provision. So now they will have to appeal, and that could be resolved in either a mediation or tribunal. And disputes, where are we? Yeah, or tribunal, because of disputes between families and councils, that's how they can be resolved. Carris's family tried both before she got an EHCP. 99% of cases in England that reach a tribunal are won by families. And as Carris's dad explains, they know that not every parent will come back for appeal, and he calls it a deliberate policy or fatigue. In other words, they lose some cases. Many people will give up. And he says he thinks it's a deliberate policy or fatigue that ends up like hurting children and families. That's a good expression. I'd also call it like a war of attrition, really. Who gives up first? It's very draining. Kelly also ended up going to tribunal because the council refused to assess her son. She says, you end up feeling powerless, powerless to move things forward. Similar, really, to how adults experience dealing with social care, as I've got my own battle at the moment with social services. It's a similar sort of thing. It's incredibly draining. You have to keep on fighting because that's the only way you get the support. It's this deliberate war of attrition, war of fatigue. So Kelly ends... by the way, she also speaks to West Sussex County Council and a cabinet member there for children, young people and learning at West Sussex County Council talks about the high demand for the plans, which has outstripped the funding. And she said the number of children with EHCP has increased by 80% in the last 6 years across England, partly as parents and schools get better at identifying children who have SEN, especially autism. So there's been increased demand, but not enough funding to go with it. And schools should provide general support for SEN from the funding they already get from central government, but the amount of money the amount of money expected to spend on each SEND pupil has stayed the same since 2013, while the costs have gone up more than 40%. So as a result, more families are turning to EHCP to get extra support, and then councils are picking up the bill. And then she talked about how councils have run into deficits, say money that might normally be spent on other local services like repairing roads, etc. So I'm going to move over to video number 2 now anyway to carry on going over this, and I do have a lot to say about this myself and my own thoughts on it, but I'm just going through the programme. So moving over to video number 2 now.